I'm up against Tricky Fox in Analysis Daily, a guy who is well-liked for good reason and has 10 times as many subs as I do. But this is an analysis contest, and I honestly think we can make the upset of the year happen if everybody votes. And make sure you vote for the other bracket too. Deckard Spade versus Riley Miller. It's important, otherwise your vote won't count. Please, I want to win this thing, so share this video with anybody you know. You can follow the inlay card to vote right now, or you can let this video convince you and then vote at the end. Are Joanna Lewis and Christine Sanko from feuding families? Pretty much every episode they wrote has been about a feud or a conflict. Sibling rivalry, the old guard versus up-and-comers, an entire relationship based on a lie, an entire relationship based on willfully overlooking flaws, capitalism versus hippies, meddling in a foreign government's election, and then these two episodes that don't really fit the pattern against the ones that do. I mean, they did the Hatfields and McCoys in season 5, and now the Montagues and Capulets, but if you'll permit me to undercut that a little, this story isn't actually Romeo and Juliet.
If they do see thee, they will murder thee.
I mean, the similarities go about as far as lovers defined as star-crossed.
They had that star-kissed kind of love.
From rival families who died, if they are actually dead.
If Mom and Dad were here, they'd be so proud of you.
I mean, my headcanon's always been that they ascended to alicorn status and said, fuck this gay Earth, and are currently flying around the cosmos on a wicked awesome space adventure. What did you pessimistic douchebags think this scene was signifying? Not to mention that Burnt Oak and Granny Smith would be dead if this was actually following Romeo and Juliet. But nonetheless, it's still a brilliant way to get all the appropriate implications across in a kid-friendly way that said kids won't be equipped to understand or appreciate until they get to high school. Unless they covered Hamlet, which is probably how Scootaloo's parents died. All of the differences from Romeo and Juliet actually make this romance seem far more legitimate. I mean, it's not a high bar to be considered far more romantic than Romeo and Juliet, which is a story about a grown-ass man who gets his best friend killed because he wanted to bone his 13-year-old neighbor? I mean, seriously, those two met on a Sunday night, and they were married and dead in 4 days. These two met as literal babies.
It sure does, Buttercup.
Mighty articulate babies, but keep in mind that this is the version of the story that they told to Goldie Delicious so that it could be cataloged. So, of course they would have their adult voices. So both stories started with love at first sight, but Bright Mac let it stew for like 15 years.
Happy 131,456 hour anniversary, darling.
Before they were forced to act on it by extenuating circumstances.
The Pears are moving.
And I love this reaction. It's like, but were we born? They were legitimately invested in their parents' burgeoning romance, and they just lost track of the part of the story that they already knew. Which is a fine line to walk between sincere and disingenuous. I mean, the writers literally scripted an audience reaction to the story they were framing. But the Apples are just seriously getting invested in their parents' past. And you know what? I was too. Because going into it with the knowledge that this story doesn't have a happy ending elevates the saccharinity of their unnecessarily forced long-distance covert relationship to hair-pulling levels of frustration. They deserve to be together, you fucking assholes! And on the note of fucking assholes, I actually buy Grandpare's reaction to this wedding. I mean, did any of you read a book called White Fang in grade school? Or see that one episode of New Girl?
Are you white fanging me?
This is Grandpare's way of accepting that his daughter is grown up and making her own decisions. His intention is to make the choice easier on her by being an absolute ass, so she doesn't have to second guess herself. You can see it in his face. He breaks into sadness and forces the anger, not the other way around. He's trying to manipulate her into doing what she wants, not what he wants. Because if he tried to end things amicably and broke down demonstrating how much he was willing to change just to make her happy, that might tempt her to give him a second chance, which he doesn't want. You know he must be stubborn because that trait runs in the family. Relenting would just make it harder on both of them by hurting his pride and making her feel worse about sticking to her guns in the face of her father's desperation. This episode is beautiful and upsetting in all the right ways. It gets a 10 out of 10, 2 thumbs up, and it even brought a quiver to the lip of a man who exclusively browses nihilist memes on Facebook. Now that we got that out of the way, let me tell you why this episode sucks and you should hate it. Since the Pears moved away so long before the Apple parents died, why would Granny Smith be hesitant to talk about the feud when it couldn't possibly be related to their deaths? How did AJ and Big Mac even learn about the feud in the first place? I'm seriously asking, what combination of events would lead to a knowledge of the feud, but not an acknowledgement of their parents' involvement in it? Seriously, if there's a plausible explanation, or even a slightly implausible one, let me know, because I'd love to not have this complaint about this episode. And is the reason for the feud not obvious? The land was given to Granny Smith's dad by Celestia. Their hard work cultivating that land is the reason Ponyville exists.
And that is how Ponyville was founded.
Granny Smith openly told that story in season 2, and they had to have learned that the pears existed by finding their orchard, which is adjacent to theirs because they bucket clean every season. So they would have seen the pear trees and put 2 and 2 together with Granny's story to figure out that the pears were squatting on their land and becoming competitors? It's a wonder that the feud went on as long as it did when the word of God was actually on the apple's side. Why did they never complain about the trespassers directly to Celestia? Aside from this, the episode is predicated on the fact that the apples never knew their mom's maiden name?
Pear butter. Well, that was a given name.
Their Aunt Orange looks just like their mom, if you turn the saturation way down. AJ lived with her. Did she never say anything? Is she even canon? Will we ever find out whether or not Joanna Lewis and Christine Sonko actually watched the first 2 seasons of the show that they're serving a story editor on? And does it bother anyone else that the word parents has pear in it? Anyway, Analysis Daily voting. Watch my Hamilton video because it's awesome, and support my Patreon because I'm working on my RWBY Volume 4 review, which is going to be massive. Thank you.